Hey YouTube, Freedom Voice here. Want to start another video series. This is going to be like a three-part series entitled What's Wrong with Fusion Centers. In this video series, we're going to look at exactly how the fusion centers are set up and how they're funded. I'm going to begin here with a video from PBS.
Michael German is a retired FBI special agent who focused on domestic terrorism.
Problem is there's so much collection that it's hard to discern which threats are real and which ones aren't. And particularly when there's so much disinformation and misinformation being pushed through this network of fusion centers.
German is now a fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice and the co-author of a new report titled Ending Fusion Center Abuses. He argues the centers have been ineffective in assisting counterterrorism efforts, they lack effective oversight, and that the broad collection and sharing of intelligence that's not connected to any specific crime has led some fusion centers to abuse civil liberties.
For almost 20 years now, these institutions have improperly collected information about people exercising their First Amendment rights.
For example, in 2020, German says hacked, leaked data revealed that fusion centers in at least Minnesota, Maine, Texas, and California surveilled and then hyped the threat posed by Black Lives Matter protesters.
So I guess you can already see that fusion centers were instrumental in Black Lives Matter. They were set up to, number one, surveil, and number two, to kind of hype the all of the confusion surrounding Black Lives Matter. And that was in 2020. And they have been instrumental in a lot of other counterintelligence operations throughout the United States and even outside of the United States. Michael German is the one who was a special agent for the FBI. He was in my previous video. He did co-author this document here, What's Wrong with Fusion Centers. You can see his name there at the top. It was written in December 2007. You can see there Michael German as well as Jay Stanley. So this is a very, very well researched article put out by the ACLU. Again, another document by the ACLU. This one comes out of the New York office there. And so we're going to get into the document here. First off, I want to show sort of a map here of all the fusion centers in every state. You can see in the teal green colors represents states that are already set up with fusion centers. You can see the blue are the states that are sort of have a fusion center under development, and then the gray represent the states that do not have a fusion center. Now, in the introduction in this document, it says here, the origin of fusion centers, federal government encouragement of fusion centers, a dark history of abuse of secret intelligence activity, fusion centers today. Now, I'm going to go through this and just kind of jump around, but I want to get to the dark history part. That's very, very important here. The origin of fusion centers. After 9/11, pressure grew for a larger state role in counter-terrorism. At first, the F-boys attempted to increase intelligence sharing with state and local law enforcement by expanding their Joint Terrorism Task Force, JTTF, but state and local officials continued to feel that the federal government was not sharing enough information to allow them to prevent terrorist attacks. This frustration with the JTTF system developed because while state and local law enforcement officers participating in JTTF were given security clearances, secrecy rules prevented these officers from sharing any intelligence they acquired with other state and local colleagues who did not have such clearances. From a police department's point of view, it did them very little to send personnel into a task force only to have them cut off from and, for all practical purposes, no longer working for their departments. At least one city, Portland, Oregon, actually withdrew its officers from the Portland JTTF because of this problem. So you can see that fusion centers are set up not only to assist law enforcement, but they're also set up to sort of hide secret societies and their function and their role in quote unquote law enforcement. You can see that there's a close tie between secret societies, secrecy, and security clearance, the government, as well as law enforcement. It's a perfect recipe for corruption. And you're going to see that throughout the document. Goes on to say intelligence fusion centers grew in popularity among state and local law enforcement officers as they sought to establish a role in defending homeland security by developing their own intelligence capabilities. These centers evolved largely independent of one another, beginning in about 2003, and were individually tailored to meet local and regional needs. Now, I'm going to kind of skip here to the section that says federal encouragement of the growth of fusion centers. As fusion centers proliferated, national efforts at bolstering, defending, and standardizing these institutions on the part of governors as well as federal government began to intensify. The federal government began providing facilities, manpower, and financial resources to fuel the growth of these state and local intelligence centers. So you can see here clearly in this document, it says the federal government provided funding, manpower, as well as other resources to fuel the growth of these fusion centers. In 2006, the Department of Justice and Homeland Security produced a report entitled Fusion Center Guidelines, Developing and Sharing Information and Intelligence in a New Era, which outlined the federal government's vision for the centers and sought to encourage and systematize their growth. Intelligence sharing among states and jurisdictions will become seamless and efficient when each fusion center uses a common set of guidelines, the agency proclaimed. Now, that did not happen. There is no real consistency. There's definitely not any seamless networking between the fusion centers because they're all different. They all operate based on different rules. And so there's no collaboration for the most part between the centers. The guideline defined a fusion center as a collaborative effort of two or more agencies that provide resources, expertise, and information to the centers with the goal of maximizing their ability to detect, prevent, investigate, and respond to criminal and terrorist activity. These goals are laudable and appropriate for any law enforcement intelligence operation, as we all want police to be able to effectively protect us from criminal and terrorists. But the federal government intends for fusion centers to broaden their resources of data beyond criminal intelligence to include federal intelligence as well as public and private sector data. So you can see this is the reason why the federal government is funding fusion centers, is because they kind of want them to expand their scope of intelligence gathering beyond the state level to include the federal government. Now, here's the section that I really want to get to, entitled A Dark History of Abuse of Secret Intelligence Power. It says here, expanding the scope of an intelligence agency mission in that way, particularly when done in secret, is an invitation to abuse. As there is a long, nasty history of abuse surrounding vaguely defined proactive intelligence as carried out by domestic law enforcement agencies at the local, state, and federal level. Law enforcement personnel and agencies have actively joined with corporations to track, surveil, and harass the labor, anti-war, civil rights, and other movements pushing for social and political change. Now, I want to read that again. It says law enforcement personnel and agencies have actively joined with corporations to track, surveil, and harass the labor, anti-war, civil rights, civil rights, and other movements pushing for social and political change. So that's the purpose of fusion centers. They join with corporations to track and surveil and harass. So they're definitely basically the center for managing TIs, targeted individuals. They're the center and the hub for their surveillance as well as harassment. Urban police forces long maintained political intelligence unit, also known as anti-subversive squad or the Red Squad, which spied upon and sabotaged numerous peaceful groups, often in utterly illegal ways throughout the 20th century. And I want to show you a picture of the Red Squad. This is actually a picture of how the Red Squad was used back during the COINTEL program. These are actual men who were hired by the police. You can see this one gentleman here with looks like a U.S. Army jacket on. So it was a collaborative effort with police as well as the Army as well as corporations back then. It goes on to say, for its part, the FBI ran a domestic intelligence, counterintelligence program called COINTELPRO that quickly grew from a legitimate effort to protect national security into an effort to suppress political dissidents through illegal activities. Frequent targets were groups that criticized the F-Boys itself. So the COINTEL program was a program that started out with a legitimate purpose of protecting national security, just like fusion centers, just like, the whole targeted program and the non-investigative subjects and whatnot that we've been talking about. And they quickly sort of grew into an organization that sort of repressed dissidents and target people. And they targeted innocent people, as we'll see here in a moment. It said frequent targets were groups that criticized the F-Boys. The Senate panel that investigated COINTELPRO, called the Church Committee in the 1970s, found that a combination of factors led law enforcers to become lawbreakers. But the crucial factor was the easy access to damaging personal information as a result of the unrestrained collection of domestic intelligence. And that's exactly what's happening under the the program now, as far as the watch listing program and non-investigative subjects. They seem to have access to data collection through that program, and the fusion centers sort of divvy out and manage that information. If you remember back in the 60s, Martin Luther King was also sort of an enemy of the state. And he was sort of targeted and, I believe, attacked by the police as well as government informants under the COINTEL program. And in fact, I believe he was assassinated by the deep state at that time. Going back to the document here, it says the Church Committee found that part of the problem with COINTELPRO was that no one outside the F-Boys was ever supposed to know that it exists. No one could object to activities they weren't aware of, and as investigators found, the absence of disapproval was interpreted by the Bureau as sufficient authorization to continue an activity. Secrecy created a haven from the public eye where abuse could flourish. And that, guys, I believe is the reason why fusion centers are the center for abuse under the targeted individual program now, or the non-investigative subject program. I believe that a lot of what's going on now as far as TIs are concerned, as far as all of the watch listing and the violation of human rights, as well as the violation of our constitutional rights, all of the loss of liberties can be traced back to uh, abuse under a secret program, which was very similar to the COINTEL program. This is a fact, friends. And as we continue looking into this, as we continue studying, reading through this document, you're going to see very clearly that fusion centers were set up to basically violate human rights, to spy on people, and to report back to the F boys. And basically track individuals who were either dissidents or people who were seeking for social justice.
A fusion center is this Orwellian black hole.
Lauren Regan represents two local climate groups that are suing Oregon's Department of Justice, which operates the state's fusion center, alleging they were being surveilled despite not being suspected of committing any crimes.
Oregon, through its fusion center, is spying on lawful political organizations and activists, primarily using digital means merely because they were advocating, in this case, in opposition to the Jordan Cove LNG pipeline. We hope that this case will basically ensure that the government and the state are checked in their overstep of using these types of fusion centers as sort of black holes of spying and intelligence gathering, where the public doesn't get to know what is being done or why,